The US government is in danger of shutting down soon. Now, if you keep up with politics pretty regularly, you might be thinking, yeah, I hear about this threat every year, but it never actually happens. Well, this year is a little different. And if you haven't really been keeping up with politics for the last few years, you might be thinking, wait, the government can shut down? Yes it can. And it has before. In this video, we're going to talk about why the government is in danger of shutting down right now, and then what would actually happen for regular people if it does shut down. And then finally, I'm going to talk about what I think is the most realistic scenario. The US Congress needs to agree on something called the appropriations bill that lays out which departments get how much money for the next year. The problem is that now more than ever, our politics is extremely partisan. The Republicans and Democrats can't come to an agreement on what we should be spending our money on. Now, right now, the Republicans control the Senate and the House and the White House, but that doesn't necessarily mean that getting a bill passed is easy. The Senate needs 60 out of 100 votes, and Republicans only have a slim majority, so they would need some Democrat support in order to get the spending bill passed. The proposed appropriations bill includes cuts to Medicaid and other medical benefits, which is something historically Republicans like and historically Democrats don't. There's also an increase in security for lawmakers as a response to some of the political violence in recent years, which Democrats say should be its own separate spending bill. If Republicans can't get enough votes from Democrats in the Senate, the government effectively shuts down, because without a passed budget, they can't spend any money. Now, there are some exceptions for things like the military, and things like the post office function independently from the federal budget. But yeah, lots of programs are going to be paused indefinitely, and a lot of government jobs will have to go without salary until the budget gets passed. Any kind of government shutdown would have extreme costs for the country. It could be hundreds of millions of dollars, even if it's only down for a few hours. So obviously this would be extremely unpopular, and neither party wants to get blamed for causing a bunch of benefits to be paused. Now, because of our extreme partisanship, the ability for politicians to work across party lines is getting weaker and weaker for years. Republicans and Democrats are basically playing a giant game of chicken. Neither one wants to be blamed for a government shutdown, but they're also waiting for the other side to compromise. The only difference is, in this game of chicken, it's regular citizens who have to bear all of the risk and will have to pay the price. Now, there is something called a continuing resolutions that could potentially push the goalpost down a few months, but it doesn't change the fundamental dilemma. It seems that Republicans and Democrats have become incapable of working with each other, even when hundreds of thousands of people could go without paychecks for a while, and our economy could lose billions of dollars. Which brings me back to the next point. What's actually happened when the government has shut down in the past? Now, if you've been around long enough, you might remember this happening multiple times in the past, but the last time it happened had by far the biggest impact. I remember hearing about it in school. It was the end of 2018 going into 2019. If you're like me, you'll remember that Donald Trump wanted to spend $5 billion to build a wall along our southern border, and the Democrats weren't having that. Like back then, Republicans controlled the Senate and the House and the White House, but they didn't have the 60 out of 100 senators. And I remember thinking at the time as a kid, wait, the government is shut down? Well, why isn't the sky falling? Why isn't everyone dead? When is the apocalypse coming? And yeah, looking back, obviously that was super naive. As far as I know, nobody died, but it obviously was extremely inconvenient for a lot of people in ways that I couldn't understand back then. Lots of people with federal jobs had to work for over a month before they finally got their pay. And there was a lot of other services that did shut down. For example, the national park services, you couldn't go to a national park, a few other things like that. So what do I think is most likely to happen? Well, it's kind of tricky, because usually when this kind of thing happens, both sides will agree to a continuing resolution, like I mentioned, which is basically keeps the existing spending for a little while until they can agree on the final budget for the next year. But this time, the continuing resolution is not a clean bill, which means it isn't keeping spending exactly the same as it was before. It includes some cuts baked in. Also, Donald Trump has made it very clear that he doesn't want the Republicans working with the Democrats under any circumstances. It's not really how he rolls. So it is kind of up in the air, but you also got to remember that most people generally blame the party that's in power for everything that goes wrong. So Republicans will probably get most of the blame for not compromising if things shut down. That's why I see Donald Trump probably telling Republicans not to compromise, for at least another week or two. But when it really comes down to it, I can see a lot of senators who want to keep their seats rushing a final compromise at the very last minute. This isn't like last year, which was right before an election, but I still think a lot of Republican senators are probably worried about losing their seats in the midterms. But who knows? Maybe it'll be the Democrats who will compromise, or maybe the government really will shut down for at least a little bit. And as for long term, well, I wouldn't bet any money on our politics getting less extreme and partisan. But I guess we'll see how it all turns out. Thanks for watching. See you later.